what we've had over the last couple of years are these really great co-pilots that you can ask them questions and they can give you good answers. That's evolving from just being able to give you good answers to being a companion that will actually perform work on your behalf. So you can not only ask it and get an answer, but you can ask it to perform a task on your behalf. And so increasingly, that's what we're going to start to get out of our capabilities. And so many of them, we made over 80 announcements this week at Ignite. Some of the tooling that we are bringing to the market is going to help our customers take advantage of the agentic capabilities of co-pilots. And that's an exciting advancement from, again, we weren't there 6 months ago, but that's all happening in real time.
Hi, wherever you're joining us, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Tech Conversations, where we bring you insights from tech entrepreneurs, CXOs, and investors. I'm Hari Arakli, and in this episode, Christopher Young, Executive Vice President of Business Development, Strategy, and Ventures at Microsoft, talks about how AI is evolving from generating responses to actually fulfilling various tasks on behalf of human users. We recorded this at Microsoft Research Lab in Bengaluru on November 21st during Chris's latest visit to India. And in this brief chat, he gives us a quick overview of how Microsoft aims to become a platform underpinning AI innovation and adoption in markets around the world, including India. He also talks about how the AI adoption gap between Silicon Valley and India is narrowing, and Chris expects that some AI innovation, especially in areas such as healthcare, for example, will even come out of India first to be adopted in other parts of the world. So Chris, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate your time, sir, and looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise.
So for a general audience here in India, especially, if you could give us a quick background about your work. Tell us a little bit about what it means to be boss of corporate strategy as well as ventures in Microsoft. Kind of give us the big picture as well as a day in your work kind of snapshot, and we'll go from there.
Happy to do that. So I lead our business development, strategy, and ventures teams at Microsoft at the corporate level. And what that means is I really have kind of three different teams that engage in much of the frontier business activity for the company as a way to think about it. Our mandate from Satya is to really think about and work on partnerships, investments, strategic topics. Think about what's going to move the needle for us in the long run, over a 3, 5, even a 7-year horizon, or even further out on the horizon. That's really the big part of what our business group focuses on. Now, we do that in a couple of different ways. One group we have is our business development team, and our business development team works on our more complex partnerships at Microsoft, and that could span a variety of different use cases, from partners that you may or may not have heard of, like OpenAI, which are some of our most important partners.
Yes, $13 billion. We wouldn't have heard about it.
all the way to we just going on this week in Chicago is Microsoft Ignite, and at Ignite you've got a bunch of different partners that get highlighted because they're working with us in many different ways. We have many partner ecosystems around all of our different platforms. And oftentimes our teams will work on those kinds of partnerships as well. So we really, we help scale the rest of the business. We help fill in product gaps through partnerships. We help amplify the ecosystem and our product capabilities through partners. And that's something that's really, really important. And for example, we had some announcements this week around security. And and as you heard, security is a core topic for us as a company. And that's something my team worked on, is all the partnerships around our Sentinel Graph and the security work that was done. And some of the partners that were featured on stage at Ignite are partnerships that our team helped bring to bear. So that's one category we work on a lot. On the corporate strategy side, it's really about really working across Microsoft to build perspective on where our markets are headed, what the competitive landscape looks like, where we should be thinking about placing our bets in the long run. One of my favorite ones is, I've been at the company now about 4 years. And a couple of years ago, one of the categories that we looked at in corporate strategy, we said is going to be very, very important, is autonomous transport. And you fast forward 3 years later, and now we are starting to see autonomous transport take hold in different cities, not only in the US, but around the world. You now can get into, and like in my home city in San Francisco, I can now get into an autonomous vehicle and take a ride. It doesn't have a physical human driver. My kids think it's the most fascinating thing ever that this can happen. But that's a category that in a strategic level, we identified this several years ago. And from that, we made investments in companies like Wave out of the UK, which is building autonomous driving software that gets OEM'd into third-party vehicles. But this is something, just a good example of a topic we identified, and now that's becoming a much bigger part of the way the economy and the tech landscape is forming. And so that's like an example of some of the kinds of works that we do in our corporate strategy team. And then the third one is our ventures organization, where we're making investments in early stage companies, mostly Series A, Series B companies that are important to Microsoft. And we have several core thesis areas that guide our investment strategy. For example, we invest in cybersecurity companies. That's a core thesis area. We invest in AI infrastructure companies. That's a core thesis area. We invest in some vertical software as a service, and increasingly software as a service is becoming more like AI as a service companies. So we have a couple of different categories like that where we try to go really deep. Foundational AI infrastructure is another category that we like to invest in as well. And that's just important for us, is that we're making our bets that are aligned to core thesis areas that we believe are going to be important, not just to the company today, but in the long run.
On a daily basis, I would imagine your work could involve for you to stay on top of everything that's happening around the world, which, to me, it looks like an impossible task. How do you stay on top of it? And do you use AI much in that?
So I have the privilege of being able to look across a lot of what Microsoft does. I have a small team, but we sit at the corporate level, so we do have an opportunity to look across and work with many different teams. But yes, there is no really typical day. One of the way I think about it is a lot of my time does get spent working with partners, whether those are small companies, medium-sized, or very large companies, working with our teams to enable partnerships to come together across Microsoft. A lot of times we're working on partnerships that require us to do something unique, and so there's a lot of work that goes on internally to figure out how we can actualize those partnerships and create value not only for the partner but also for Microsoft and get that balance right. So I do spend a lot of time with customers, a lot of time with partners, but I also have to spend a decent amount of time working with my colleagues internally, again, to enable these partnerships to happen and to enable us to realize the joint vision oftentimes that we have. But I will tell you, I try to make sure that I get an international point of view as well. One joke I like to tell is, I live in San Francisco. I work for Microsoft. I literally don't think I could be any more immersed in the AI landscape. I live in the area where it's just a hot topic like every single day. So it's good for me to be able to get out, come to India. I spent time in Latin America, Europe, just to get a perspective on what's happening in different geographies as well, because it's so easy to just kind of feel like it's all AI all the time, because it's such an important topic and because of where I'm based. But I will tell you, it's been great to be here, and it's also great to be able to get a perspective by spending time in the ecosystems that are a little bit outside of the West Coast of the United States.
Has your work brought you to India before? I imagine.
I was here 1 year ago,
okay.
Actually, last time.
Okay, all right. The reason I asked that was also to get a sense of what you're seeing in terms of what your customers are telling you about their tech adoption in general, but also AI adoption. How's that changing? What are some things that stand out for you globally, as well as if there's anything noteworthy about India?
Globally, AI adoption is really happening in a couple of different ways. The first way is kind of out of the box, right? It's like using copilots. GitHub Copilot is becoming very, very popular amongst developers. Tens of thousands of organizations, and this is that's happening globally. It's also happening here in India. In fact, a lot of our partners here, a lot of the large IT outsourcers are using GitHub Copilot for their developers across the board. So it's becoming very, very popular. as one of the key kinds of co-pilots that's getting adoption in many, many different types of companies, sizes of companies in different parts of the world. So that's one category. Obviously, M365 Copilot, which is is correspondent with all of our Microsoft 365 products, seeing a tremendous amount of adoption, not just globally but also here. For example, we've Wipro, Infosys, a number of the large IT companies here, service providers here that are based out of India, are working with us, using Copilot internally, working with us and our joint customers to enable Copilot there. So we really are starting to see adoption in that layer of the stack. We're also starting to see a lot of use cases that are very specific or vertically oriented. So, for example, today I had a meeting earlier with a startup that's just focused on enabling retailers to leverage AI in their marketing stack, right? Because there's so much work that goes on, and if you sell products, for example, and setting up the photos and creating marketing collateral, they're using AI to do a lot of this and really taking a lot of the time and the expense and the complexity out of the process. And that's just one good example of the way in which AI is getting applied in a vertical fashion. Customer support is the other obvious one. You're seeing a lot of effort happening right now in terms of people bringing AI to bear to help customer support agents be better, faster at being able to answer questions, do follow-up. We use, for example, AI inside of Microsoft in our own customer support organization. As you might imagine, we have very complex cases often that our customer support teams have to deal with. And so the ability to help AI help them answer questions, to be able to write up cases after the fact so we can learn from those, it's really shrinking the amount of time people have to spend. It's improving their overall satisfaction. It's improving our ability to help our customers. And those are just some examples of many that we're starting to see adopted, again, across not only industries and geographies, but also here with a number of our customers and partners in India.
At Ignite, in the keynote, one thing that jumped out to me that Satya said was, empirically, AI is doubling every 6 months. I think he was talking about Moore's law, and then he spoke about AI. Can you give us a sense of what he's actually talking about? What about AI is doubling every 6 months?
What Satya is referring to in that case is really the capability of AI is changing quite rapidly, and it's enabling more and more use cases. It's enabling people in new and different and better ways. Here's a good example. If you rewind the clock back a year ago, one of the knocks on using generative AI was around mathematics. Like if you asked it to solve a problem, it actually might give you an approximated answer as opposed to an exact answer. It wouldn't actually calculate the answer for you. That's all changed now. You can actually, in fact, one of the personal examples I'll give you, obviously, in the United States, we just had a big election, and there's a lot of questions around what will the tax policy be in the United States because you're going to go from a Democratic administration to a Republican administration. And so I actually asked, I asked Copilot to calculate for me under different scenarios what would be the tax implications of some of the different policies that the new administration has talked about implementing. And what was really fascinating for me is the power of its ability not only to give me the answer, but to actually walk me through the calculations that it was doing as part of the answer. And that's an evolution of where we've been. That's just one small example in my own personal life of how the tools are evolving. I would say the tools are becoming more intuitive. I think the tools are, AI is becoming much better. We're getting much better at figuring out how to get the right answers out of our AI agents as well. This is another important thing. So not only are the tools themselves scaling and getting better, but our ability to use them, provide the right context for these agents to be able to give us better answers. Obviously, context windows have changed tremendously, which allows us to interact with the agents in much different ways, again, than we could a year ago, even 6 months ago. And so those are just some of the examples that at least I see that are changing how these AI-based agents are able to operate. And then this path of agentic AIs, and one of the key themes that Satya talked about at Ignite this week is the ability for agents, these AI agents and co-pilots, to do work on our behalf, and that's really exciting, right? Because what we've had over the last couple of years are these really great co-pilots that you can ask them questions and they can give you good answers. That's evolving from just being able to give you good answers to being a companion that will actually perform work on your behalf. So you can not only ask it and get an answer, but you can ask it to perform a task on your behalf. And so increasingly, that's what we're going to start to get out of our capabilities. And so many of them, we made over 80 announcements this week at Ignite. Some of the tooling that we are bringing to the market is going to help our customers take advantage of the agentic capabilities of co-pilots. And that's an exciting advancement from, again, we weren't there 6 months ago, but that's all happening in real time.
So this vastly improved ability for AI like co-pilots to come back with answers that are really useful. Are you finding that your large customers, and you've given us some examples of early adopters, are you finding that they are convinced, or at least more convinced than a year ago, and they're willing to bet their important business decisions on the output that this kind of AI is giving them?
I think every customer I have talked to, large, medium, small companies all around the world, everybody's going down the path of adopting more and more AI. I mean, in fact, I don't know that I can't tell you that I've even met with anyone who isn't working on AI in some way, shape, or form, and implementing it in some way in their organization. I mean, at this stage in the game, if you think about it this way, every CEO today has to have an AI strategy, or the board will be dissatisfied because of the potential. And so that's all happening. And I will tell you, even yesterday, I was talking to this is kind of a medium-sized company here, and the guy who's head of product, he said to me, look, I'll be honest with you, 5 or 6 months ago, I wasn't sure about Copilot, but he said, now I'm the biggest cheerleader for it. Every time somebody asks me, for more resources, every time they ask me about solving a hard problem, my first question back is, how are you using Copilot to solve a problem? How are you bringing it into your workflow? How are you making it a habit, part of what you're doing? And that's something he said. And I think that's a good, I'm seeing more and more of that, where as people are learning the capabilities, as they're becoming more familiar using co-pilots, and this is something we used to tell people for all of 2023 and for a lot of this last year, we were telling people, just use it, just try it, and you'll start to see the power and potential of what it can bring to you personally, and then you can extrapolate from there the power and potential of what it can do for you from an organizational perspective. And this is now happening, and I think people are seeing it in many different ways. So I don't see much skepticism at all, really. It's more about what people are working through is just the hard questions of how. How do I make sure I've got the right data policies in place, the right governance in place, the right security models in place, the right responsible AI the right responsible AI principles, programs, processes in place to make sure that as an organization, any organization is trying to bring AI, whether they're bringing it to bear from an internal employee perspective or making it customer facing, it's not a question of if, it's just about when and how, and making sure that they do that in a responsible way, to make sure they do it in a way that they're going to get the best benefit out of it. And so I don't think skepticism is really that's not how people are thinking about it. What they're thinking about is, how do I do this well? How do I do this effectively? How do I do this responsibly? And you're starting to see so many different use cases. It's fascinating to me. I think we're in such an amazing time.
I suppose one obvious way to look at how that's changing is to see if that is reflecting in uptake for Copilot and other AI technologies. Thus far, much of the investment, especially in this wave of AI over the last maybe 5 years, has been driven by very large tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, such companies. And I think you've made this point as well. I was reading one of your interviews from last year about how the non-tech, very large companies at some point also have to kind of take the plunge. Do you see that happening? I mean, do you now see a BlackRock willing to invest billions of dollars in AI, or a Goldman, or a GE, or a Reliance Industries and a Tata Group committing to very large investments in AI? And can you give us a sense of how that might change things for the development of AI?
I would say a couple things. The answer is, number one, you are starting to see these Main Street companies. In fact, one of the announcements we made at Ignite this week was BlackRock talking about all of the investment that they're putting into AI. And I think that's a really great example. I would say financial institutions have moved quite fast to implement AI. And many financial institutions, if you take a step back, many financial institutions have been using versions of AI for a long time, whether it's about fraud, modeling as a big area where a lot of financial institutions have been using AI for a number of years. But increasingly now they're starting to roll out AI tools to their teams. They're starting to think about how they can roll out AI tools to their customer base. And so I think the potential in just even in the financial services industry for AI is tremendous. Now, I would say it's a little bit apples and oranges to compare the technology platform provider investment to the investment that I might make if I'm a manufacturer or a retailer or a financial services organization. Because all of those organizations the Main Street companies, if you will, they're going to be the consumers of all the AI investment and the products and the stack. When Satya spoke at Ignite this week, he kind of laid out the 3 pillars of our strategy. There's copilots, there's the copilot stack for AI, and then there's the copilot PC. And obviously, when you think about all the investments the hyperscalers are making, it's about building out the stack. From our perspective, it's from literally the data center infrastructure all the way up through the copilot, with the end user copilot that people will consume, and then all the tools like AI Foundry that we announced this week, which will allow third parties to use different models and have all the tooling to be effective at bringing different models to bear for different use cases that they're trying to solve for their enterprise. All of that investment is going to benefit companies in these different industry verticals: manufacturing, healthcare, IT, financial services, you name it. And I think that's really how to think about the different balances of investment. But what people will do, the amount of use cases they'll roll out, I think most organizations at this point are really trying to rethink how they will have AI, literally become a part of everything that they do. And I think even as individuals, I would tell you one of the categories that I think about a lot is AI for good, AI for all. And it's even this week, I've been blown away by just some of the companies that I've met. Like I met a company the other day that's literally for $50 US now being able to bring high school education, to students all over India, right? So those who don't even have access to the best education can now get access to it as long as they have a mobile device. And like that, if you think about the potential to democratize education and bring some of the best to bear using AI capabilities, like that's going to uplift humanity in so many different ways. And we have undereducated populations in countries all over the world, including in developed countries like the US. But this opportunity is massive, and I'm seeing that happen in India, and I think it's a fascinating, really important point. And all that investment that companies like Microsoft are making is enabling that to happen. And the other category that I often think about, I won't go through this without talking about it, is healthcare. I think all the work that organizations are doing to get better drug discovery and development, to come up with better therapeutics, diagnostics, cancer diagnosis and detection using generative AI. All the investments again that we're making are going to enable companies, healthcare providers to deliver better health outcomes to so many people in so many countries around the world. One of the conversations I'll recall is last year, I spent a lot of time with a number of organizations in Southeast Asia. And one of the themes that came up time and time again was just for people who are trying to get diagnosed for certain types of cancers, because there weren't enough doctors in certain countries like Vietnam, You couldn't even get your X-rays diagnosed. And now with AI, they can work through the backlog much more quickly, identify cancers that were harder to identify with the human eye, but also actually get people diagnosed so they could actually get health care. And again, that could save people's lives, it could prolong people's lives, and certainly improve health outcomes for many. And I think that those are just some examples of ways in which all of this investment that's happening is going to benefit humanity more broadly. I know, there's lots to be done there, there's way more that can be done there, but it's certainly something that I think is important for all of us to keep our eye on, in addition to all the great things that companies and individuals will do with the products.
Microsoft, in some way or the other, will basically become an AI company, if it is not already an AI company. 10 years from now, let's say, from the autonomous vehicles you mentioned in London to cancer diagnosis, or a small startup building a retail solution. And I think in one of your earlier conversations, you talked about how it'll even change the way we get a cup of coffee. I mentioned all that because the question is, what do you see will be the role of Microsoft in all of this? What's the big picture that we should think about?
So we would absolutely say we're an AI company as Microsoft. And I think our view would be that we will enable much of this innovation. And one of the things that's really important to note is that Microsoft is a platform company. And part of our role as a platform company is that we enable the world to build on that platform to create all the solutions we've been talking about here in our short discussion. And I just think there's so much promise and there's so much yet to be done. And there's so many use cases that we won't even be able to get to today that we're enabling with our platform, with our capabilities. In some cases, we'll bring our own tools, like our own copilots. We talked about GitHub Copilot earlier as an example, which are making developers much more productive, helping them write code, helping them move more quickly. Those are some examples of what we'll call first-party products that we're bringing to bear to help individual developers as well as companies improve their overall throughput, improve their overall ability to solve their own problems. That's one aspect, but the other aspect are all the foundational platform capabilities that are going to enable all the innovation that we'll see. Innovation like autonomous driving. One other innovation, another category would be robotics. You mentioned getting coffee differently. You can imagine robots serving us coffee in some future state. So I think there's just so many examples of innovation that will happen, that will be enabled by the platform investment that's being made, by all the work that's being done to train and improve the models, by the diversity of models that'll help us be really great at solving for certain use cases, the tooling that will make us better and better at implementing those models in different ways to solve problems and make them easier to use. I think those are all it's such a broad spectrum. If I think about AI, there's almost no aspect of our lives where I think it gets left out. I think AI becomes a material contributor to so many pieces of the way we live our lives, whether it's on the personal side or whether it's how we operate in a work context.
So, in the context of your global AI strategy, if you will, I'm kind of loosely describing it that way, global AI strategy. Can you give us a sense of your India strategy? Of course, on the one hand, is a market where you want to sell Microsoft products, but you also have large development centers building software for you. So give us a sense of how the India strategy would play a role in the overall big picture.
Well, India plays a huge role in the big picture. Number one, we have literally large numbers of team members. And so all the product announcements that we made as an example at Ignite this week would have ties back to teams that are here in India. So as you pointed out, we have such a huge Microsoft population in India and a diverse population in India where we've got team members who are working on Consumer Copilot, team members working on M365 Copilot, team members working on Azure, so all the foundational elements, AI Foundry, enabling our customers to be able to do this. And then obviously we also look at India as a really important market. internal market. And there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in India. There's tremendous amounts of innovation that's going on here. I will tell you, one of the topic areas, and maybe we can come back to this, that I've been really impressed by is this notion of quick everything, right? There's quick commerce, but I would say I'd broaden that and say there's quick everything. It's not just being able to buy groceries or goods, but actually being able to buy services and have those services delivered. One example that blew me away the other day was, you can get a blood test result in 6 hours. Like, you can get your blood drawn, and 6 hours later, you can have the results from that blood test. But we don't have anything like that in the U.S. today. So India is really innovating in ways that we aren't even seeing in the Western world. And that's some of the things. That's a good example of what's something that's really unique here in the local market. And then India as a service provider and a technology provider to the world is also important to us, right? Because Microsoft as a platform, and we talked about some of the great examples earlier of a lot of the large IT companies that serve not only local markets but serve the world. They're going to enable a lot of these AI use cases. They're going to transform how they deliver the services that they do using AI. And so India has a multifaceted role to play in AI. There will be local innovation that'll be different, and we'll see the local companies utilize and innovate with AI in new and different ways. The Microsoft teams here play a huge role in how we bring AI to the world. And then our partners that are here and that will bring AI to the world along with us and enabling that last mile in so many different ways. So India is an incredibly consequential country as it relates to realizing the AI opportunity. And I will tell you, when I was here a year ago, I felt like there was still a bit more of a gap between what was going on in the U.S., particularly in the west coast of the U.S. around AI, and what was happening here. That gap is not. It's really close. Like, the number of companies, organizations, the adoption is happening very rapidly here, and I think in some ways we'll see it happen more rapidly than it'll happen in other parts of the world. Like, for example, in healthcare, I expect that we will see AI innovation happen more quickly here in India than it will happen in the U.S., partially out of necessity. And it's fascinating. We may be learning from you on how what's possible with AI in some of these healthcare use cases, and that's exciting as well.
How do you envision that? Because we're all in India, we're hoping that the so-called fintech revolution that has happened will also happen in healthcare. And you talked about how Microsoft will become the platform for a large number of stakeholders to innovate on top of in AI. So how would you envision Microsoft playing a role like that in healthcare in India? Because an individual may not be able to pay a lot of money for healthcare, as you know, it's mostly out of pocket still here, but it's a billion-person scale. So how do you look at that?
I think our role will continue to be as a platform provider, as a technology provider. When we do have expertise, we can bring to bear, but it's all the innovation that will happen in country. The people who are here, who are solving problems for the billion population, are going to be the ones that will drive the breakthroughs on how to deliver it. And that's and so what we're excited about is our ability to work with those players to help them innovate. Why? Because they're going to be closer to the problems in the market, to what's going to work, what's not going to work. I had somebody say to me, I think something that's really important is that one of the moats right now around really using AI effectively is you do need people who are close to the problem to still be there in the loop, to train, to refine, to augment, and to figure out where and exactly how to implement AI to really solve the problem. AI tools themselves don't inherently know what the problems are. People know what the problems are. And AI tools don't inherently know all the specifics of how to solve those problems. They need to be taught. Just like, we always talk about AI being like a smart college student, right? A smart college student can do a lot of things, but they still need to be trained in a discipline. They need to be trained to become doctors. They need to be trained to become lawyers. They need to be trained to become developers. AI is no different. It needs to be trained to solve the problems. And so it's the people here who are solving the problems today will be the ones to teach AI, leverage the fact that it's expertise at your fingertips, leverage the fact that it can scale in much different ways that are going to, that if utilized in the right way, can really be utilized well to solve some of these societal problems, healthcare being one. And because countries like India have, like you say, very large, a lot of underserved populations, I expect we're going to see a lot of innovation in categories like healthcare that will happen here that we won't see in the Western world at first.
As boss of strategy at Microsoft, and in the big picture context, what are your top challenges?
You know, our biggest challenge today is to be able to move fast and adapt. I mean, this is all happening very quickly. If you think about it, we're just right now at the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT really making generative AI accessible to the world. And you know, AI has been around for a long time. We've been working on generative AI for years as an industry, but it was when ChatGPT came out is when it really became more mainstream because it made it accessible for the average person, and that really changed things. And so, you know, what we think about often is just how do we make sure we're moving quickly enough? How do we make sure that we're really covering the landscape in the right ways? How do we make sure that we're nimble enough so that as this moves and changes, like Satya said, you know, with the AI changing every 6 months. I mean, if I go back to 2023, I would have told you that every couple of weeks it's all different. Like literally the number of companies, the way it was working, it was all like every couple of weeks you could just see it was changing. Like there were hackathons happening in San Francisco where, you know, you would have breakthroughs, and so it was constantly changing. You know, obviously it's starting to become a bit more of a mainstream rhythm, so that's going to make the cycles a little bit longer. But still, relative to other technology transitions, the cycle times and the rapidity of change is dramatic. It's exponential at this point. And so as a very large organization, you know, one of the main challenges that we are faced with every day is how do we make sure we're at the vanguard of this? How do we make sure that we're innovative, that we're agile, that we're driving, that we're paranoid about all the different use cases that we're not covering. And so that's important to us. That's one of the things that I would say keeps every Microsoft executive up at night is that how do we move fast enough? How do we stay agile? That's super important.
So if to Satya's AI changing every 6 months, over the next 2 cycles of that, over the next 12 months, what might be your top priorities?
It's hard to predict the future, except for the fact that I will say I expect that we're going to have much more AI. As we talked about earlier, I would expect you're going to see AI being able to perform a lot more tasks and functions. So we're moving from co-pilots to co-pilots as agents. Agentic AI is something that we're bringing to bear, and I expect you're going to see a lot more of that in 6 months and 12 months time. You're going to see these agents become more capable. You're going to see them become more pervasively utilized by individuals. You'll see them more pervasively utilized by organizations. But a lot of our mission remains the same. It's about building partnerships. It's going to be about driving the foundational investments that are required for the world and the ecosystem to build on our platform. It's going to be about remaining nimble and open to changes that will happen in the environment and then being able to adapt.